A search for truth over what happened in the waters between China and Taiwan. And a prisoner's death sparks debate about conditions in the country's jails.
Here at the Singapore Airshow, it's these unmanned systems that are drawing the eyes of the world's militaries. We ask what that means for the future of warfare.
Plus, botanists in Taiwan remain unregulated after calling themselves doctors. Warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Ing-wen. We begin with the latest fallout over a fatal chase between Taiwan's Coast Guard and a Chinese speedboat that left 2 Chinese fishers dead. Taiwan's president-elect and current Vice President Ching-te has voiced support for the Coast Guard. He said they should continue to enforce Taiwan's law. Tensions are continuing to simmer over the incident, and a dispute has now erupted over who is to blame. Tiffany Wong reports.
Putting 2 Chinese fishers to rest. Taiwanese officials came to express their condolences at this funeral parlor on Taiwan's outlying island of Kinmen. The fishers died when their boat overturned after encountering Taiwan's Coast Guard near the island. Relatives of the 2 Chinese fishers arrived on the island to identify the bodies and are expressing doubts about the circumstances of their deaths. The deadly incident occurred when an unnamed Chinese speedboat crossed into Taiwan's territorial waters near Kinmen, coming into contact with Taiwan's Coast Guard before capsizing. Of the boat's 4 passengers, only 2 survived. One survivor said they were hit by Taiwan's Coast Guard.
We did
But Taiwan's Coast Guard says they signaled to the Chinese boat for an inspection when it sped away, and so began a chase.
因该艘陆船蛇形巨舰逃逸，于 CP-1洞5艇船首迂回航行，在高速追逐状态下，船身多次接触，船身易受海浪影响剧烈摇晃。
But the local prosecutor's office said the surviving Chinese fishers' accounts disputed the chase.
这2个人也都表示说，对海巡队的执法程序并没有意见。
The Coast Guard said they did not take a video of the incident, but that they would cooperate with the prosecutor's investigation and bring the truth to the families. China, which claims sovereignty over Taiwan, does not recognize the island nation's territorial waters, and the Beijing government said it would step up patrols in the narrow strait between the Chinese coast and Taiwan's Kinmen Islands. Just days ago, China's Coast Guard boarded a Taiwan tourist boat near Kinmen, making it clear that this dispute is far from over. Alex Chen and Tiffany Wong for TaiwanPlus.
Lawmakers from the U.S. House Select Committee on China are in Taiwan. Leslie Liao has more from Taipei.
Another strong show of support from the U.S. as Representative Mike Gallagher leads the delegation here to Taiwan. Gallagher chairs the U.S. House Select Committee on competition between the U.S. and China. He's leading a delegation of 4 other bipartisan lawmakers here. The purpose of the trip is to show support for Taiwan's current and future leadership. The delegation arrived early this morning, and one of the first things they did was meet President Tsai Ing-wen. During that meeting, Mike Gallagher said that Taiwan enjoys bipartisan support, and he also credited President Tsai Ing-wen with making U.S.-Taiwan relations stronger than ever.
Today we've come as Democrats and Republicans to show our bipartisan support for this partnership, which, thanks to your leadership, I think is stronger and more rock solid than ever.
After meeting the president, the delegation met with the current vice president and president-elect Ching-te and his deputy, Kim Xiao. After that, they met with Taiwan's foreign minister Joseph Wu at the Taipei guest house behind me. But before that meeting, they held a press conference addressing things like continued support for Taiwan, even as U.S. aid to Ukraine wavers, and continuing strong ties no matter the outcome of the U.S.'s upcoming presidential election.
We need to learn the lessons of why deterrence failed in Ukraine, apply them to the Indo-Pacific so that we don't find ourselves having to fight a war. Well, I'm very confident that support for Taiwan will continue regardless of who occupies the White House.
Now, Gallagher is known to be pretty hawkish on China, and his presence here in Taiwan probably goes against the wishes of Beijing, which claims Taiwan as part of its sovereign territory. Now, one of the words that we've been hearing a lot throughout this morning describing U.S.-Taiwan relationship is friend. Now, that's language that Beijing probably won't take nicely to, whether it's in regard to its relationship with the U.S. or Taiwan. John Su, Patrick Sun, and Leslie Liao in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
A court in Taiwan has awarded nearly $86,000 to the family of a diabetic man who died in prison. The man died after 2 days in Geelong Detention Centre in northern Taiwan in 2022. His family says the prison refused to take delivery of the medicine he needed to survive. The prison says it will appeal the court's decision. To learn more about the state of medical care and other conditions in Taiwan's prisons, John Van Trier spoke to Jaime Ocon of NGO Prison Watch.
Is the death of this man with diabetes in prison a one-off case? Or are people in jails in Taiwan often denied essential medications or medical care?
我觉得不是例外耶，就是我们收到的陈情投诉其实也非常的多。如果你没有那个药房里的药的话，那医院的药的话，你就必须当事人出去才能够去申请。可是这个是不可能的事情，觉得就是监所会比较担心说，同学会把药藏起来，那它可能是一个获利的来源。比方说把假装没有睡觉的问题，然后去取得很多的药，然后那个药可能会卖给其他的朋友的一个狱友，或者是说可能作为治伤的一种方式。
What about the dietary needs of people with diabetes in Taiwan's jails? How good are Taiwan's jails at either providing essential foods or avoiding foods that prisoners cannot eat?
大概这几年才开始说，如果会特别会为伊斯兰教的特殊的饮食习惯，或者是吃素的素食的朋友，去的收容人去提供特别的便当，就是特别的烹煮方式。可是你说包括其他营养的方式啊，或者说因应疾病的一个更特殊的需求的话，那这个在监所里面是几乎不可能做到的。
In your view, how good are the conditions in Taiwan's jails compared to those in other countries around the world?
管理员要每个人要去管理的那个就是同学就是要去负责的那个比例啊来讲的话，台湾是很高的，它比邻近的香港甚至是东南亚一些国家都来得高。我觉得最重要的是思维上的问题，就是你只是要把受刑人当作是一个隔离社会，那在监服刑的这段期间，其实我们一直主张不是以管理优先，而是以教化优先。一个很麻烦的问题是，接下来宪法法庭也会讨论的是，他们的工作的收入太少，他们有强迫工作，但他们一个月工作的所得大概是200块到500块，那你几乎是没办法去照顾自己的。
That was Chen Huiming of NGO Prison Watch speaking about conditions in Taiwan's prisons. As jet planes decorate Singapore's skyline, the country's government has made a pledge towards sustainable fuel options. But as Rosie Granenja reports, experts are questioning the validity of the scheme.
Planes perform aerobics for enthusiastic crowds at Singapore's biennial airshow. The planes may look the same, but this year's exhibition is a little different, with organisers claiming the show is turning green, featuring planes running partly on sustainable fuel.
Sustainability, sustainability, and sustainability. So I think this is what we have seen from 18 to 24, right? The focus and the interest on sustainability has grown.
The airshow switch-up comes just days after Singapore announced a pivot to non-petroleum-based renewable fuel options by 2026. Requiring all flights departing from the country to use at least 1% sustainable aviation fuel, made synthetically or from organic materials. It's a shift that is crucial for the carbon-reliant aviation sector to reach its goals of net zero carbon emissions by 2050. And major aviation companies taking part in the airshow say they're on board.
We've been, very active in this space for some time. It's, in a sense, it feels like business as usual for us because we're procuring more than 20% of our fuel for Boeing itself as sustainable aviation fuel.
But experts are questioning the effectiveness of the scheme. With sustainable fuel accounting for just 2% of the jet fuel market, they say there's not enough to satisfy policy or future demand. Sustainable aviation fuel is an expensive resource, costing 5 times as much as conventional fuel. That's a cost ticket holders will foot the bill for through a levy, according to Singapore's Transport Minister. There are also concerns so-called sustainable fuel is not made entirely from environmentally friendly materials, including palm oil, whose cultivation causes mass deforestation to clear way for plantations.
There's so much green coating around a hugely carbon-intensive industry. If you look at I'm sort of obsessed writing about greenwashing at the moment, and globally, after oil and gas firms, it's aviation firms that are called out for greenwashing more than any other type of sector, for two reasons. One is that they keep banging on about sustainable aviation fuel as a solution to fly green, without being specific about the fuel that they're using.
The move to using a more sustainable form of fuel shows the aviation industry recognises its responsibility to reduce emissions. But in an accelerating climate crisis, carbon-intensive air shows like these could become a thing of the past if the industry is pressured to take more steps to curb their environmental impact. Dolphine Chen and Rosie Greninger for TaiwanPlus.
This year's Singapore Airshow isn't just about civil aviation. The latest military tech, including dozens of fighter jets, is also on display. But while manned aircraft are still the main attractions, militaries are increasingly interested in the unmanned systems on display. Jaime Ocon reports.
Fighter jets like these have been some of the most sought-after pieces of military hardware for decades. They're fast, can carry a variety of weapons, and are essential in protecting ground forces. But they're expensive to operate and are only as good as the pilots that fly them. That's why many attendees at the Singapore Airshow are interested in the wide variety of unmanned aircraft or drones on display.
所以其实今天我们可以看到，战斗机贵，但训练一个飞行员会更贵。可是如果今天是无人机，我是训练的是一个无人机飞行员的操作手的话，这架无人机遭到攻击，可是人是没事。
Militaries around the world are investing more in unmanned systems to carry out missions that would be too expensive to use fighter jets. And that's important for a country like Taiwan, which is threatened with invasion by neighboring China and has a limited military budget. Taiwan has already invested billions of US dollars into F-16 fighter jets like these. They're often used to warn off Chinese warplanes flying close to the country's borders. But now, Taiwan is looking to invest in unmanned systems that can help or even replace these fighter jets. In May of 2023, Taiwan purchased 4 MQ-9B Sea Guardian drones from General Atomics, which should be delivered by 2025. These drones are most often used for maritime surveillance and can stay in the sky for more than 18 hours, providing crucial intelligence from above. General Atomics says these systems could help Taiwan reduce the burden placed on its fleet of F-16s and their pilots.
So what that means to Taiwan is now I can retain the service life of my manned aircraft by employing unmanned aircraft to go out and do some of the long endurance, dull, boring missions that typically a manned platform may go do and make a much more efficient operation.
But these types of drones are not just limited to military use. Unmanned systems can gather information without risking the lives of pilots. It's a capability many countries want to use in humanitarian missions.
You look at worldwide and you look at what's going on from illegal fishing to recently the earthquake in Japan. We are providing overflight services in support of first responders. So there's a number of missions, as you know, military as well as civil, that these platforms can go out and provide, but it's really about providing the most affordable solution.
While fighter jets are a long way from being obsolete, countries like Taiwan think a mix of manned and unmanned systems is the best way forward for defense strategy. That means keeping key personnel out of danger, but still in the fight. Chris Ma and Jaime Ocon in Singapore for TaiwanPlus.
Coming up after the break, should Taiwan worry about extreme heat in February? We ask a meteorologist.
For more stories from here in Taiwan and around the world, be sure to check out our social media or visit us at TaiwanPlus.com.
Welcome back. You're watching Taiwan Plus News. U.S. forces are returning to the Philippines, Taiwan's neighbor to the south, after a long absence. As John Van Trieste reports, is a move that has consequences for all of East Asia, including Taiwan itself.
Local historian Danon Dizon lights a candle outside the church his family had built in 1877. He's a descendant of the town's founders and a guardian of this township's past. This is Angeles in the Philippines, now a city of 500,000, profoundly shaped by a long U.S. military presence. For almost 100 years, neighboring Clark was home to the biggest U.S. airbase outside the U.S. itself, and Subic Bay, just an hour down the road, hosted one of the U.S. Navy's chief bases. At the History Museum where he volunteers, Dizon recalls what it was like growing up in the presence of the U.S. military.
It was a staging area for logistics during the Korean War and in the Vietnam War, which I saw with my own eyes. Most of the casualties and wounded personnel were evacuated at the Clark Hospital. So they were treated there prior being brought back to the States. So yeah, when I was little, I would sit on the grass and watch the planes fly full of bombs.
But in the early 1990s, U.S. troops left this area for good, driven out by a powerful volcanic eruption and a decree from the Philippine government. Defense analysts say the 30 years since have given China room to flex its growing military might in the region. China has increasingly pressed its claims over the entirety of the South China Sea, rejecting the Philippines' competing claims to sovereignty in the area. Beijing not only patrols the disputed waters frequently, clashing with Philippine fishermen, it also makes regular military incursions on nearby Taiwan, another territory it claims. In 2012, a standoff with the Chinese Coast Guard finally led to a rethink in both Manila and in Washington.
At the time, the Philippine government didn't have any assets to respond to the incident, and critically, neither did the United States. So the nearest basing presence of the United States at the time was in Guam and in Japan. So really, there was really no rapid response force by the United States that's able to respond to that mass sudden escalation in Coast Guard and military presence by China in the South China Sea.
Since then, the Philippines has given the U.S. access to a growing number of bases, 9 as of early 2024. So far, troop numbers are small, just a few hundred, a far cry from the hundreds of thousands once stationed across the Philippines. But analysts say the Philippine government may expand this presence after the coming U.S. presidential election. Crucially, 3 of the bases are in the far north of the country, with easy access to Taiwan. And one is within an hour of Angeles, bringing the possibility U.S. troops could become a common sight again here, too.
So I think that's there's a big obligation, actually, since Taiwan is just our neighbor, and it's just a few thousand miles away from, 100 miles away from. So I think the Philippines has the obligation to, personally, to protect that, since China has some aggressive moves.
Not everyone shares this view. Former Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte is one notable opponent of conflict with China and a larger U.S. presence. And there's also the question of whether Manila would even let U.S. troops use these 9 bases to help Taiwan. But some believe that Philippine officials would quickly allow it if war broke out.
When push comes to shove, the intention, the hope there is that the Philippines will authorize such military actions to defend Taiwan, right? And of course, they will find a lot of support for that, especially in the Philippine military establishment that considers status quo in Taiwan as a core national interest of the Philippines. Because if China conquers Taiwan, that frees up China's military resources so they can concentrate in the South China Sea.
All are agreed, though, that the U.S. return to the Philippines is changing the calculus in a region that's become a potential global flashpoint. and its renewed presence in localities like Angeles will have an impact far beyond the Philippines itself. Luffy Lee and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
South Korea's government is threatening to arrest doctors walking off the job. More than 8,400 doctors have left their posts because of government plan to nearly double the number of medical students. Government officials say the emergency wards at 3 major hospitals are running out of beds, and worried patients have turned to smaller medical centres out of fear they won't get treated at larger hospitals. Taiwan has seen some record-breaking heat. A weather station in southern Taiwan has recorded a temperature of over 37 degrees Celsius, 5 degrees higher than the previous record for February set almost a century ago. Sally Jensen spoke to meteorologist Ching-te from Weather Risk to find out more.
37.7 degrees Celsius was recorded at a weather station in southern Taiwan in February during winter. This breaks the historic highest temperature for this time of year by almost 5 degrees. Why is this happening?
So the first reason, because January to February, the global temperature is the top one in record. So at the average, the contribution for the global warming happened. And second is the local circulations. Because right now, in last few days, lots of the very warm current from the south, from the Pacific, moved to Taiwan. And the wind is the south wind. So the east of Taiwan, west of Taiwan, all of the Taiwan got the very warm temperature. And this year, because also another phenomena is El Nino. So that's the reason, global warming, circulation, also the El Nino. All of the 3 key elements jump together. So this makes the very high temperature.
Temperatures are set to go back down this week, so this isn't necessarily a long-term trend. But should we be worried about the summer?
Actually, in record, all of the summer will be hotter and longer in the future. So I think, by my experience, because recently the summer is quite hot, more hotter and hotter, longer and longer in the future. So no need to prediction. The result is quite clear. We will get very warm summer, very hot summer, and a longer summer this year.
What kind of contingency plans should people and the Taiwanese government be making to stay safe from the heat?
During the summertime, the hottest is not the south, it's the Taipei Basin. When the Taipei Basin meet 35 degrees, we can say it's a heat wave days. Lots of the elderly will get the very dangerous situations, especially if the air conditioning is not good enough. The outdoor labor or any kind of the activities will happen because of the heat. So what we can do is to educate the people. Around the noon, it's very hot, and you should keep in the indoor. Most people, they should know in the future, how can we cool down the city, especially the Taipei City and New Taipei City. They encourage the house you build, you should have some criteria about energy efficiency and also make more trees. And so such is kind of the tool or policy. Right now, last month, they just announced they got approval about the city to fight against the climate change.
That was meteorologist Ching-te talking to our reporter Sally Jensen. Plant doctors are treating crops and improving yields all around Taiwan with positive, measurable results. But they must continue doing so unregulated due to a spat over words, Rhys Ayres reports.
Swapping stethoscopes for fly traps. This doctor's patients are plants, not people. Li Zonghan is one of a team of specialists called Botanical doctors. They're working in Taiwan's farmlands to help local farmers keep their crops healthy. At this farm in the southern county of Yunlin, in Taiwan's agricultural heartland, Li provides diagnoses and treatments for plants plagued by pests, with a focus on more environmentally friendly treatments.
等伫中遐，伊就放伫中安尼。安尼一组会使冻差不多1个月，你就吊伫遮就好啊。啊，伊的叶仔伊就一直飞伫内底，安尼你就袂像迄张安尼黏着顶悬拢毋是主要的害虫。
Lee wants farmers to use pesticides less and in a more targeted way. Over 9,000 tons of pesticides were sprayed across Taiwan in 2022, the excessive use of which can cause long-term damage to the land and contaminate produce with dangerous chemicals. Lee says advice from plant doctors can help reduce environmental impact and improve business for farmers.
我觉得我们的立场可以更中立的告诉他说：“阿姨，我真正想要替你省钱，我真的是想要帮你省钱，所以我们才会推不管是安全用药、精准用药。”
Crops that got diagnoses and treatment from Lee yielded 2 to 3 times more produce, with pest control and prevention costs reduced by a third, pointing to the effectiveness of botanical physicians. But the profession lacks legislative regulation, something plant doctors have been pushing for since 2016, because some human physicians take issue with the wording.
医师团体对于这个名称的那一开始我们碰到这个问题，我们也很惊讶，因为全世界都没有这个问题。老一辈的老师其实还蛮 care 这个东西，说明明就是植物医师。
Botanical doctors like Lee can continue treating plant patients across Taiwan, but will have to do so unregulated, until the government can decide exactly what to call them. John Su and Rhys Ayres for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. Before we go, tune in with us to this unique opera rehearsal in France, performed alongside a robot. It will also be streamed online for people to watch on VR. I'm Ing-wen. Take care. See you next time.